life is yours, Ares. From this day, I shall carry forth your will.
God of War rules. Yes, I know, fire up the grill because MrJarhead is cooking up some scorching taste. It's a franchise I've had my eyes on for a long time. I've known next to nothing about the series, and I purposefully kept it that way until the day I'd be able to delve into these games properly with a video. And well, that day is obviously now, and I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I have waited way too long to play these games. I've waited way too long to talk about these games, so let's jump right into them. I don't have a physical copy of God of War 3. I downloaded that on PS4. Okay, actually, I need a little bit more time before I jump into this because I'd like to thank all of you who commented on my last video. Leave a comment on this one to be featured in the next one, and the biggest of all thanks go to my patrons Stin, Dotman, Jesse, Brian, Angel, The Foe 3, and Papa Noob 345.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
If you're unfamiliar with the series, you play as the Spartan Kratos, who pins shoulders to mats and bangs rats. But this is by no means the way of a Chad. All the sex and drinking is a big coping mechanism for the poon-slaying Spartan because Kratos has one of the darkest backstories I've ever heard. While he is the protagonist, Kratos is by no means a good guy, and seemingly never really was. Obsessed with conquest, he murdered thousands for the glory of Sparta as the young captain of the Spartan army. He also seems to have little problem with innocents dying unnecessarily.
Thank you! Thank the gods you came back for me!
I didn't come back for you.
No!
But Kratos does have some humanity in him. Deep down, he is ashamed of his actions and the infamous reputation he's built for himself because of them, and does show remorse from time to time.
By the gods, what have I become?
As the trilogy progresses though, Kratos loses more and more of the little humanity he has left, and while you can't really justify a lot of his actions, you can certainly understand many of them, and that's more than enough to make him a fantastic, tragic character in my eyes. The first God of War is basically a flashback game, at the beginning showing the present day where Kratos can be seen cliff diving. You slowly uncover Kratos' backstory the more enemies you slay, and you come across many characters who are horrified and disgusted at the mere sight of Kratos, and not because he's an albino. Actually, that's exactly why. About 10 years before the events of the game, Kratos was, as I said, the leader of the Spartan army and was engaged in a war with barbarians. As he was about to lose the battle and subsequently his life, Kratos made a pledge to the god of war Ares, swearing his life to him to carry out Ares' will so long as Ares gave him the power to win this war. Ares politely declined this plea. Of course, the wish was granted, and Kratos became the perfect warrior. This is also how he got the Blades of Chaos. But this was a foolish deal on Kratos' part, as you'd expect, practically selling his humanity, trading it to become a ruthless killer, just so he could save himself in what would have been his final moments. But again, this wasn't just about saving himself. This was about conquest. This was his ego. This is what he was born to do, what he was brought up to be since he was a little kid. But then one night, as his army ambushed a village, in his blinding, bloodthirsty rage fueled by Ares, Kratos ended up murdering his own wife and daughter. However, this was a ploy set up by the god of war. He wanted this to happen so that with Kratos' family out of his life, Kratos would have no more distractions and would become an even more invincible super warrior. The village oracle who warned Kratos not to enter the temple where his wife and child were, cursed him because of his atrocious actions, permanently melding the ashes of his dead family to his body, rendering him a ghostly white, hence his new nickname, the Ghost of Sparta. Holy fuck. My jaw dropped like an anvil when I saw this scene. That is some of the most messed up shit I've ever heard. Understandably, Kratos has basically had PTSD ever since, which brings us to the beginning of the game on Kratos' ship, where he asks Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, what he has to do to finally be relieved of this unrelenting guilt he's felt and the subsequent nightmares he's had every day since. Athena instructs Kratos to save her city of Athens, which is being terrorized by none other than her brother, Ares. Ares. And as long as Kratos can kill Ares, he will be forgiven of his past, which of course Kratos has no problem with because Ares ruined his life. From there, you embark on an adventure through the city of Athens under siege, through the desert of lost souls, and to the temple of Pandora on the Titan Kronos' back to locate Pandora's box, which is the key to slaying Ares. I'll get more into what exactly Pandora's box entails. There's a lot of lore that goes into that thing. Just know for now that it contains the power to kill a god, which would be nice for Kratos to have in this instance. Kratos is still plenty strong on his own though, slicing and dicing through massive monstrosities, and it is absolutely metal. The gore, the absolute gore! The unadulterated brutality and violence in this game, it's so over the top, but it's so good. I mean, what you're seeing barely scrapes the surface of the amount of carnage you're gonna see throughout this video. As God of War takes place during the times of ancient Greece, you'll find yourself combating basic soldiers, but also taking on mythological beasts like minotaurs, which are half man, half bull, harpies, which are the servants of Ares, which are these freaky bird monstrosities mixed with women, gorgons, which are very similar to Medusa, who are slippery, slithery bastards with snakes for hair, and the power to turn you to stone, which can be annoying as hell. The satyrs, or satyrs, which are like these funky goat acrobats who, while not as physically imposing as minotaurs or cyclops, are far more challenging to deal with because of their agility and the way they handle their weapons. And yes, this gameplay of me is already very painful to watch. I know, I was pretty bad in the beginning. There's tons and tons and tons more creatures to be found and to be absolutely brutalized. For example, yeah, you fight this big ass Hydra within 5 minutes of the game starting. God of War spends no time messing around. It immediately comes out swinging dick first, perfectly setting up what you can expect to be in for. Though admittedly, there's not a lot of these major encounters, as there's only 3 throughout the whole game, with the Hydra, one against this giant Minotaur like 80% of the way through the game, and of course Ares at the end. There's plenty more major encounters in God of Wars 2 and 3, which is great. Even then though, credit where credit is due, God of War 1 takes the time to make even the basic enemies, for lack of a better term, feel like a big deal, with several of them getting unique cinematic intros. Oh my god, it's a wizard! There's tons of ways to decimate your enemies. Your default weapons are the Blades of Chaos, which can perform basic slicing attacks, grab them and slash them, but as you level up your blades with experience you earn from fighting and unlocking chests, you unlock so many new combos like the Cyclone of Chaos, which is great for crowd control, more powerful combos like the Spirit of Valor or Hercules, which are slower but pack more of a punch. There's even other melee weapons like the Blade of Artemis, which is this giant curved sword. Swords, which while only being one blade, deals more damage than your dual-wielding blades. And if you're really in a pinch, you can activate the Rage of the Gods, which temporarily supercharges your health and damage output. There's also, which I'm sure you noticed by now, the hits counter. It's so much fun trying to keep the momentum going and rack up as many hits as you can. You can do more than just melee attacks though, as you're granted magic powers by several gods throughout the game. You've got Poseidon's Rage, which smites all nearby enemies, Medusa's Gauge, which turns enemies into stone. Honestly, I forgot about that power a lot. I probably should have used it more. Zeus's Fury, which allows you to throw balls of lightning, which only really came in handy when there's archers around. Other than that, it's kinda useless to be honest, especially because you only have so much magic you can use at a time, as your magic and health don't refill themselves gradually as time passes. Just like battle experience, there's different chests that you have to find to refill your magic or health, and in these chests you can also find Gorgon Eyes or Phoenix Feathers to increase the overall amount of health or magic you can have. And finally, you've got the Army of Hades, which you receive pretty late into the game. Makes sense because it's a fantastic power-up. I just selfishly wish I could have had more time with it. There's really nothing I can complain about when it comes to God of War 1's combat. Well, almost nothing. The button ones aren't bad, but the analog ones can be insanely unresponsive at times. Sometimes I would do exactly what the analog event tells me to. Other times I would panic and go in the complete opposite direction the game would want me to, and it would work fine. In my experience, God of Wars 2 and 3's analog events were way more responsive. Unfortunately, the first installment, they're just not great. But that's seriously like the only complaint I have with the first game, pretty much at all, and luckily those events don't even come up too much. While you spend a majority of the time murderizing everything in your path, there's also plenty of time devoted to puzzles, which is a great little breather every now and then from the relentless combat. But God of War 1 even sometimes mixes puzzle aspects with the combat, like having to plug these nests where harpies are spawning from by moving statues around that are in the room, or like having to use your Medusa powers to turn a Minotaur into stone on top of a door switch and race to the gate before the Minotaur reverts from stone. It's so good. The soundtrack and atmosphere are also masterfully crafted as well. The music during during giant hoss fights is just as epic as you'd imagine. But just as well done are those relaxing, quiet moments you're given to breathe as you explore areas and solve puzzles. The atmosphere this game pulls off in its more calm moments is really remarkable, like when you have to venture out into the desert to kill some sirens, and all you can hear is their faint singing and the wind eerily blowing through the lifeless terrain. The ambience is just enrapturing in moments like this, especially when you're playing at 1 AM with all the lights off like I was. But again, how cool would it have been for another major encounter to be fighting some giant desert monster here? Oh well. Speaking of that though, the scale of environments is ridiculous in this game, especially for a PS2 game. As I said earlier, right off the bat you're thrust into battle with this Hydra, so you immediately feel the girth of the game. God of War also makes great use of camera angles and cinematic shots to really exaggerate just how large certain environments truly are. I mean, like half the game is spent on top of Kratos' back in this temple, and the place is huge! It took Kratos 3 days just to climb up this thing, it's unbelievable! And some portions of the area have you scaling around and you can see Kratos crawling through the desert way down below. It's like some Shadow of the Colossus shit, which is another game I should probably check out soon. That's pretty much all I've got to say about the gameplay at this point. So once Kratos retrieves Pandora's box, Ares senses this from miles and miles away and proceeds to launch a log straight through Kratos, killing him. Jokes aside, it is true that Kratos dies here, but even death doesn't stop Kratos from fulfilling his quest for revenge. He even runs into a familiar face here.
You again?
He proceeds to escape the underworld by climbing this big rope through a grave leading back to the overworld, which was foreshadowed earlier in the game. And the gravedigger here is apparently like the alias of Zeus, so cool. Scenes like these in God of War are so intriguing. The way the game telegraphs things and builds tension is so perfectly done. You just can't help but cling on to every word said in these scenes.
Good, my boy, good. Athena has chosen wisely. I knew it was so.
Who are you?
So, you have the blades, the skin as pale as the moon. You are the one indeed. Perhaps Athens will survive at that. But be careful. Don't want you dying before I'm done with this grave.
A grave? In the middle of a battle? Who will occupy it, old man?
You will, my son. Oh, I've got a lot of digging to do indeed. All will be revealed in good time. And when all appears to be lost, Kratos, I will be there to help.
Once back in Athens, it's time to finally face Ares with the power of Pandora's box, and the battle is surprisingly easy. But that's only the first part, as Ares then makes you revisit the most tragic moment of Kratos' past as you defend his wife and child from evil clones of himself. I gotta say, press circle to hug your family was not a mechanic I was ever expecting to use in God of War. Thank God we get away from this cringy lovey-dovey shit and get back to fucking the next two games. Ares then strips away Kratos' power and magic, but Kratos uses this giant sword nearby to continue the battle, which was really cool because you actually use this sword as a bridge earlier in the game. The final moments here are spectacular. The dialogue is perfect.
That night, I was trying to make you a great warrior. You succeeded.
However, what should have been a happy ending for Kratos couldn't have been more of the opposite. Athena pretty much pulled a fake out, revealing to Kratos that the gods of Olympus have forgiven Kratos for his horrible deeds, but that doesn't mean that they were gonna wipe his memory. So with that, Kratos will continue to be haunted by the atrocities he's committed. This leads to us going back to the beginning of the game, as we see Kratos left with no other choice. But even that option, the gods will not allow Kratos to go through with, forcing Kratos to become the new God of War.
By defeating Ares, Kratos, the once mortal warrior, became the new god of war. However, Kratos soon found himself alone on Olympus, shunned by his fellow gods.
God of War 2 takes place 13 years after the first game, and a short time after the prequel Ghost of Sparta. Anyway, after the gods have betrayed Kratos yet again, you know he ain't taking that lying down. So right off the bat we learn that on top of being betrayed by Ares, and basically Athena for lying to him, just about all the gods of Olympus have shunned Kratos as he had retaken his mantle as the head of the Spartan army, conquering Greece bit by bit. I mean, what did you guys expect? You made him the god of war. Taking up a life of battle again was of course a way for Kratos to channel all the pain and hatred he felt towards the gods for betraying him, and to cope with his own self-hatred. Athena then betrays Kratos again, stripping away his godly height and infusing it into the Colossus of Rhodes to kill Kratos. But we all know Rhodes do not fare well against beings in god mode. And just like that, we're thrust right back into the action, and while not retaining our height, we still retain all the godly power we obtained at the end of the first game, as well as the shiny new blades of Athena granted at the end as well. I love how the gods literally didn't give Kratos what he wanted, wouldn't let him unalive himself, and Athena's like, here buddy, it's okay, have some new swords.
Give me what I want!
Also in this game, to open doors and stuff, you mash circle rather than R2, a minor change that for me made a big difference, because mashing R2 honestly caused me a lot of unnecessary frustration at points in the last game, so I guess that's a second thing I have to complain about, but again, pretty minor. As you'd expect, this intro level is even bigger and grander than God of War 1's as you fight this thing all over the city. One minute you're catapulting yourself at it to gouge its eyes out, and the next you're flung 3 miles away. I just can't believe that this was a PS2 game. The scale is out of this world. Eventually, Zeus himself offers aid to Kratos with the Blade of Olympus, commanding the Spartan to drain his remaining god power into the sword. Once you do this, you crash your way inside the Colossus, battling soldiers and scaling all the way up its interior and dismantling it from the inside out. It's a really cool sequence.
Do you see, gods of Olympus? Do you need more proof than this?
Kratos, now without the sword and having lost his god powers, is as vulnerable as a mere mortal once again, shedding his godly armor piece by piece in some great symbolism. At this point, Kratos is barely even stumbling his way towards the blade, but before he can grab it, Zeus reveals himself as the bird who shrunk Kratos down, not Athena. Zeus commands that Kratos serve him now, and Kratos knows better than last time to make himself a servant, even if it allows him to evade death. Or maybe not, because Zeus then kills Kratos and his entire army. Well, okay, that was a fun 45 minutes.
This is not the end.
Oh. I should have known it wasn't going to be that easy to end Kratos. The narrator then reveals herself to be the Titan Gaia, the mother of Earth, and she explains that she'll show Kratos the way to the Sisters of Fate, as with their power you'll be able to travel back in time to defeat Zeus. And from there, you once again escape the underworld. When you return to the overworld, you're greeted by a Rapidash and your fallen soldiers.
The corpse of a fallen Spartan. Another life cut short by Zeus. These deaths shall not go unavenged. This soldier is dead, this soldier is dead, this soldier is dead, this soldier is dead.
There's really not a lot of changes made to the gameplay, mostly some tweaks and minor additions. Honestly, the most drastic addition is right after the last scene, with these Pegasus sequences where you soar through the skies engaging in some brutal combat, though these sequences don't happen too often, like 2 or 3 times in the game, I think. Kratos gets some minor additions, like being able to sling across gaps on some Ratchet and Clank shit, while in the first game you only got 1 new melee weapon, basically. Here, you basically get 2. The Barbarian's Hammer and the Spear of Destiny. Obtaining the hammer was really cool because you earn it after fighting the ghost of the very barbarian king Kratos was going to be killed by before offering himself to Ares. And during the battle, there's a brilliant fun little callback.
No, not you again!
Unfortunately, the hammer, while it seems like it'd be really cool, it's okay at first, that is. It swings pretty slow, and there's not really a big enough increase in power between this and your regular blades to justify the slow attack speed. But once leveled up just 1 time, it's broken, because you can then summon souls to attack enemies for you, and there's really no limit on how many souls you can summon at a time. Then you've got the Spear of Destiny, which can attack pretty fast. It's a simple weapon, and there's not much more to it than that. In the last game, you had the Rage of the Gods power-up, which made sense since gods are trying to help you, but now with the Titan Gaia assisting you, it only made sense that in this game it'd become Rage of the Titans. This time you don't have to wait till the meter's filled up to use the power, or at least I think you had to wait last game, otherwise this is awkward. There's also brand new magic abilities in this game as well, such as Typhon's Bane, which is just a bow, pretty much as useful as Zeus's Fury from the last game. You've got Kronos' Rage, which is like the Great Value brand Poseidon's Rage. It's good, just not as good. The head of Euryale, I don't know, which turns enemies into stone, just like your Medusa power last game. And finally, the Atlas Quake, which fires up boulders from the ground. Overall, I think the magic abilities from the last game were definitely better, but these are by no means bad. On the bright side for God of War 2, I did find the presentation to be even stronger than the first game. The music is even better than it was before, with even grander pieces setting the stage for battle. As well as even creepier tracks setting the mood for ghostly, desolate environments. And the environments I found to be much more varied in this game. From soaring the skies to titanic ice mountains and caves, massive temples and swamps, just the color palette feels much more diverse than before. There's also even more big cinematic angles featured here, which makes sense because the developers know how good this game looks. It is way bigger than even God of War 1 after all. I know I keep saying it, but it blows my mind the amount they were able to pack onto a PS2 game. I also appreciate that there were a lot more major encounters in this installment. God of War 1, as I said, only had like 3, whereas this game has like 8. And not only are there more bosses, but they're way tougher, as is the game in general. The ones that definitely gave me the most trouble were the Cerberus and the big-titted fat meanie. I love how they build up the anticipation for the Cerberus encounter as well. It's just such great use of music and atmosphere, which this game is just dripping with. Oh, it's succulent. I really like the higher level of skill that goes into these fights, especially against the Cerberus. It definitely taught me a lesson in patience, learning to strike quickly and back off just as fast. And while not a boss fight, you have a pretty crazy encounter with Icarus, and through this encounter, Kratos gains the ability to glide because he plucked the fucking wings right off Icarus's back. And then in God of War 3, you meet Icarus's dad. That sure wasn't awkward or anything. As I said though, the game itself is much more challenging as well. Both the puzzles are tougher, enemies seem stronger. Keep in mind, I played all 3 games on the normal difficulty. In my experience, I can confidently say that this game is the hardest and 3 is the easiest. I'll admit, I was really tempted to knock the difficulty down a notch, but I never gave in. Well, there was that one time, but legit my game crashed not even 5 minutes after I did so. So I guess that was the universe's way of telling me not to be a little bitch boy and to just power through normally, and god damn it, I did. Go me, I survived normal difficulty. What an achievement. So back to the story, Gaia sends Kratos off to find the Sisters of Fate, as their time manipulation powers will be the only way to defeat Zeus. First we have to meet with Gaia's Titan brother Typhon for help, and you dumbass donkey, all the space you had to land and you decide to park under a giant finger? Are you thick? After that dumbass detour,
Gouging out a giant man's eye.
for a bow, we head off to the island of Creation, which is home to the Sisters of Fate. As you continue to explore the island, Kratos questions Gaia's motives for helping him, and this leads to Gaia explaining Zeus's origins. The Titan Kronos is actually the father of Zeus. He had many other children and devoured them all. Yes, you heard me, he cannibalized his own children in fear that they would rise up against him. Knowing that Zeus's time to be scarfed down was coming, Zeus was sent to Gaia, who is his grandmother, and Gaia nurtured Zeus. But because of Kronos, Zeus sought revenge not just against him, but all of the Titans, leading to the Great War between the Olympians and the Titans. Yeah, Greek mythology is, it's pretty wild. So towards the end of the game, you finally encounter 2 of the 3 Sisters of Fate, and the battle against them is incredible. Not only because it's pretty difficult, of course, but also because of the way time is manipulated throughout the fight. At one point, Kratos is sent back to the moment of his battle with Ares, where he defends the Blade of the Gods, not allowing the Sisters of Fate to change his fate, and then imprisons them in the past. Kratos is literally strong enough to not only deny death, but to change destiny itself. You gotta admire his determination. The third and final Sister of Fate is the most vile, disgusting, abhorrent abomination I've ever laid eyes upon. She is absolutely massive and sports an abundant amount of sores and saggy tits, and her limbs freak me the fuck out. She is so vile, I'm furious just looking at her. Finally, after defeating that fat fuck, you confront Zeus in the past in again a phenomenal fight. Or should I say, godly fight. I could have used that joke like 5 times already. It starts off with Zeus ironically becoming Titan-sized, hurling everything he can at you to stop you, before shrinking down to melee 1v1 with, of course, the Blade of Olympus. Oh, and you lug giant pillars at him as well. Zeus overpowers Kratos, and Kratos pretends to surrender before getting the jump on Zeus once again in a super tense QuickTime event. Just as Zeus is about to be killed, Athena jumps in to stop Kratos, not in an act of betrayal, but because Zeus without Olympus would fall. Kratos still attempts to kill Zeus, but inadvertently strikes Athena. In Athena's last moments, she explains that it was the same fear that drove Kronos to eat his children, which drove Zeus to betray Kratos. Because Zeus has the same desire to kill his father Kronos, Kratos has the same desire now to kill his father Zeus. That's right, Kratos is Zeus's son, which makes him a demigod after becoming a full-fledged god after the defeat of Ares. And I guess this also means that Gaia is Kratos' great-grandmother. Athena explains that all gods will deny Kratos and protect Zeus, which only further angers Kratos.
If all on Olympus will deny me my vengeance, then all on Olympus will die.
Kratos, now being able to control time itself after defeating the sisters, travels back to the Great War between the gods and the Titans, and brings the Titans back to the present. With that, Kratos leads the charge alongside Gaia and the rest of the Titans against all of Olympus.
Zeus, your son has returned! I bring the destruction of Olympus!
That is one hell of a hook heading into God of War 3.
My vengeance ends now. Zeus! Your son has returned. I bring the destruction of Olympus!
The God of War games already looked phenomenal for their time, and God of War 3 is no exception. While I played the PS3 remaster of the PS2 games, God of War 3 came out on PS3 originally, but I decided to play the PS4 remaster of the game, and my god, it is gorgeous. The game already starts off beautifully with a movie-level cinematic intro, and once you hop into the gameplay, immediately continuing from the events of the second game, it's just incredible, and it's so satisfying to be thrown right into a horde of enemies to slice up with ease. Much of the intro takes place on or inside Gaia, while also intermittently combating Poseidon and his weird spider horse minion in, obviously, by far the most impressive battle yet seen in God of War. After defeating his horrifying monstrosity, you approach a wounded Poseidon and get up close and personal with Poseidon's POV, adding an extra level of brutality to his death as Kratos bashes in his head, gouges his eyes out, and snaps his neck. It's ridiculously brutal. From there, Gaia and Kratos approach Zeus's temple, but are struck down by Zeus. As Gaia struggles to cling to the mountain and Kratos struggles to cling to her, Gaia denies him help, saying that Kratos has only been a pawn in her scheme to win the Titans' war against the gods. When will people learn that betraying Kratos never works out well for them? Spoiler, not anytime soon! Kratos falls to the underworld, once again losing the Blade of Olympus and his godly powers to the cursed souls of the river Styx. Athena appears before Kratos, claiming her sacrifice to save Zeus propelled her to a new level of existence, and she now seeks to aid Kratos in his revenge because she sees the truth that she could not before, whatever that means, and brings Kratos new blades because she always does that after pissing him off. And from there, we once again set out to destroy Zeus. God of War 3 excels at everything it sets out to do, and in my opinion, is the best of the trilogy, mainly because you can use enemies as battering rams now. On top of that, the violence is beautifully brutal, more so than ever, without being unnecessary. Most of the time. And when I say I enjoy the violence, I don't mean in a sadistic I get off on the pain by Weezer kind of way. It's more so that I love the visual storytelling, and I feel like God of War 3 best uses violence as a mechanism to tell a story more so than the other games. Of course, they all do that to a brilliant extent. It's just, again, I feel like God of War 3 did it the best. As for a more technical observation, there's a perfect balance between combat, puzzles, and some general breathing room, and the weapons and magic are easily the best of the trilogy. And beyond that, there's also the newly introduced items, which I'll get into in a minute. Let's start with the weapons, beginning with the Claws of Hades, which you obtain after killing Hades himself in one of my favorite boss fights in the whole series. To quickly gloss over it, it starts by putting your basic dodging and striking abilities to the test before you jump on Hades' chest and start chopping him up. Giant chains surge out of the ground and the souls of the damned are sent out to attack you. Then you continue to attack Hades as your blades wrap around his blades, hurl him up towards the ceiling and reconstruct his face and obtain his claws. But the fight's still not over as the slime ball re-emerges and you slice and dice him until you have to use his own weapon to absorb his soul. Yes, Kratos absorbs the soul of the god of the dead. Do you see what happens when you mess with Kratos? Why would you double cross this man? The claws are able to melee swiftly like your normal blades and also have the ability to summon different types of souls to attack enemies for you. Many of the new weapons and abilities you obtain come from slaying various gods, all of whom you see at the beginning of the game like Hades, Hercules, Helios, yeah, there's a lot of H names. You obtain the Nemean Cestus from Hercules after bashing his head in like he's hamburger meat. These giant metal gauntlets absolutely wallop anything in your path. They're so much fun to use. And finally, you get the Nemesis Whip from Hephaestus, which I'll get into more later. The electrical whip attacks the fastest and with the most range out of all the weapons. In this game, the magic works a bit differently as there's specific magic powers assigned to each melee weapon, meaning you can't just use any magic whenever you want, which I like. The Blades of Exile drop these Spartan shields with spears to simultaneously defend Kratos while still attacking. The Claws of Hades of course summon souls. The giant gauntlets can strike the ground causing a lion's roar which sends enemies flying and break their shields. And finally, the Nemesis Whip uses good old electrical powers to vaporize everything around you. Many of the powers in this game aren't necessarily new. A lot of them are really just refining and perfecting many of the previous powers you've already seen and implementing them in a way that's just super satisfying. And for my money, this combination of magic and great weapons makes for the most fun combat in the trilogy. Granted, a lot of the weapons function pretty similarly to the Blades of Exile or Chaos in the way that they regularly attack, but I don't really mind, one, because the magic powers do enough to differentiate them and make them feel special, and two, they're fun. And what better reason do you need than that? Also, almost every time I leveled up magic or weapons, it scared the shit out of me because I kept forgetting the PS4 controller has a speaker on it that makes a loud sound effect whenever you level things up. A cool little thing the controller did though was change color depending on what weapon you're wielding at the time. The implementation of items are great as well. The first you receive, or I guess, is the Bow of Apollo, which is pretty much just like the Typhon's Bane, only again, it's in its own category, meaning you don't have to waste magic to use it. Items simply recharge on their own after a short period of not using them, making the bow incredibly useful for keeping your distance in combat while still getting some shots in. You also get the head of the god of the sun, Helios, which is used to blind enemies, illuminate areas, and also reveal secrets. The final item you get is the Boots of Hermes, more H names. Christ, how many of them are there in Greek mythology? The boots can be used to quickly dash forward, which is fairly useful for blitzing enemies in combat, and you can also use them to scale walls. Killing this guy was especially brutal, but he was a prick. He totally deserved it. Kratos was literally gonna leave him alone until Hermes provoked him.
Kratos, where are you off to today? Kill any family members lately?
Oh, and one more thing. The first game you had the Rage of the Gods, the second you had the Rage of the Titans, and in this game you have the Rage of Sparta where you wield the Blade of Olympus, which is great and makes sense because Kratos is practically a total lone wolf relying on his own power at this point. I mean, not totally, but you know, a lot less than the other games.
Pimento sandwich.
Now honestly, there's not all that much I have to say about God of War 3's presentation from a technical standpoint. It's larger, of course it looks better. I will say that the environments are a lot grungier, but that doesn't bother me because of course they still manage to look phenomenal. And on top of that, we're witnessing the death of Olympus. This is literally hell on earth. It makes sense that it'd look like Armageddon. No, what's most interesting to me is the progression of Kratos' character and how they demonstrate his near complete lack of humanity at this point through even more gruesome actions and unnecessary acts of violence. That's not to say Kratos hasn't let people unnecessarily die or killed people unnecessarily in the past, or wasn't a piece of shit. He was. Again, the boat captain from God of War, for example, which, good news, they continued the running gag in this game as you find a note from him about Kratos in the underworld. I love it! But yeah, in God of War 3, the unnecessary violence is cranked up to 11.
And can you really blame Kratos? I mean, the guy has gone through it. He is bitter, he is pissed off, and he should really try reading this book, and you should too. This book, I read it a few years ago, and it really just helped change the way that I see people's perspectives, and it really helped me learn to control my own.
God or not, it does not matter at this point. Kratos has become a heartless killing machine. Maybe he wouldn't be this way if everyone would stop betraying him. Just wipe his memory already. Problem solved. Take the bow of Apollo I mentioned earlier. You get it from this nice chap Pirithous. He's been sentenced to the underworld for eternal torture by Hades and offers you his bow in exchange for freeing him. No need for hostility, just free the man, take the bow.
Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. What do you say?
No deal, Kratos barks as he hijacks a hound to burn the man alive instead. By far the most egregious act on Kratos' part is the 10,000% unnecessary killing of Poseidon's princess, who he finds locked up in Poseidon's quarters. Also, why even wear clothes? Like, what's the point? Kratos rescues her, only to guide her back to another part of the temple he's found himself in, shoves her under the crank of a door to hold in place before the weight of the crank is too much for her body to handle, and the lever collapses on top of her, crushing her, and ultimately killing her. It is just so uncalled for, but that is just how batshit insane Kratos has become at this point, using anyone and anything to further his advances for vengeance, no matter the ramifications. Seeing the Olympians mistreat Kratos time and time again, you're so ready to exact your revenge on them, and then as it happens and you hunt down gods one by one, resulting in floods, plagues, no more sun, it's uncomfortable and sad. I get it, but damn. Kratos is just about a complete psychopath at this point. Except there is just a sliver of humanity remaining inside him, and we see glimpses of this whenever he interacts with Pandora. So in the beginning of the game, Athena says that Kratos must extinguish the flames of Olympus in order to defeat Zeus. Inside the flame is Pandora's box, you know, that thing that contains the power to kill a god? Now let's go back to that guy Hephaestus from earlier. Hephaestus, the smith god, was banished to the underworld because of Kratos' actions in God of War 1.
Hephaestus was commissioned by Zeus to forge Pandora's box to conceal the evils that were released as a result of the Great War between the gods and the Titans. And he also, of course, created Pandora, who serves as the key to the box, hence the name.
But he grew to love Pandora like a daughter.
And when Zeus came to take the box,
Hephaestus lied about Pandora being the key and suggested hiding the box in the temple on Kronos' back so that nobody could ever access the power. Zeus, having become aware of Hephaestus' lie, tortured him until he confessed Pandora's whereabouts. Zeus then locked Pandora away in a labyrinth constructed by Daedalus, the father of Icarus. So now you've got Hephaestus, who wants to be reunited with his daughter, and blames Kratos for compromising his daughter and himself in the first place. Meanwhile, you've got Kratos looking to use Pandora to open the box to kill Zeus, but in doing so, this would result in Pandora's death. Even still, what is it about Pandora that apparently brings out Kratos' humanity? Well, simply put, it's because she's a child, and that fact reminds Kratos of his own daughter. Hephaestus himself uses this fact to try to convince Kratos to change his mind about using her to open the box, and though at the time he doesn't say anything, you can see it on his face for a second that he is touched by the notion. Even when Kratos and Pandora first interact, for a moment Kratos thinks she's his daughter. Throughout the game, as you talk more, Pandora explains how she's not afraid of Kratos, just like how Kratos' real life and daughter were the only ones never afraid of him. And you see Kratos' insecurities creep through.
I told you, I cannot help you.
But you're the only one who can. I know it. I trust you.
You shouldn't.
He believes that Pandora should fear him, that she shouldn't trust him. He knows he's a monster, and she knows that too. He's the infamous ghost of Sparta. But that doesn't matter to her. For the first time in the trilogy, really, we have Kratos being treated like an actual human being, not as a means to an end, not as a monster, even if he should be treated like one. Hephaestus eventually realizes there's no changing Kratos' mind about finding Pandora to bring down Zeus, so he decides to help Kratos, commanding him to find the Olympus stone from the pit of Tartarus. So with it, he can forge Kratos a mighty weapon, which of course turns out to be the Nemesis Whip. The pit of Tartarus just so happens to now be home to the Titan Kronos after Zeus banished him there out of fear, which Zeus seems to do a lot. Sending Kratos after Kronos was basically a death plot by Hephaestus, but of course we all know that death is simply not an option for Kratos. This fight is absolutely mind-boggling. You fight waves of enemies on his giant hands and pluck his giant stinky fingernails. Kronos Kronos then eats Kratos, but Kratos carves Kronos from the inside out like a pumpkin to make his escape, while simultaneously securing the stone. Hephaestus is of course shocked to see Kratos since he was supposed to die. Hephaestus then, understandably, but also like a dumbass, then betrays Kratos. And this is what happens when you betray him! He literally warned you earlier in the game!
Olympians overestimate themselves.
Interesting. I will keep that in mind, Spartan.
When will you people learn? Eventually, you finally find Pandora in the labyrinth, and the conversations these two have are really fascinating. Just about everything you need to know about Kratos' character is conveyed in this one scene. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Kratos.
Our journey is far from over, Pandora. By its end, you will not be thanking me.
I know I look it, but I'm not a child, Kratos. I've seen many terrible things. I'm not afraid. I understand what lies ahead. I saw Zeus torture my father. I saw him beaten because of me. I should have helped him, but I was afraid.
Hephaestus did what every father should do. Protect his child.
No! It's all my fault. I failed him because of fear. Fear is its own kind of darkness. In that darkness, I heard what the gods said about me. They called me a monster.
Words mean nothing.
Perhaps. But in their words, I heard fear. The fear of an ash-covered warrior. The fear of you. As the fear in the gods rose, mine was replaced by hope.
Hope is for the weak, Pandora.
Hope is what makes us strong. It is why we are here. It is what we fight with when all else is lost.
This is what hope delivers, child. You should learn that now.
Kratos is right. Pandora clearly hasn't seen Dragon Ball Super. Remember when hope wasn't enough to save Trunks' timeline and they all fucking died?
When Kratos finally brings Pandora to the flame, he has a change of heart, while Pandora is dead set on doing what she feels she was meant to do and what is the right thing to do. Brilliant little detail that Kratos won't let her go to the flame, but lets her go as soon as she says he's hurting her. As Kratos and Zeus battle, Pandora makes a run for the box. Kratos again attempts to stop her, but some cold-ass statements from Zeus make him snap.
Kratos, you know this is the only way!
Don't listen to her, Kratos. For once in your pathetic life, don't fail. Don't fail her like you failed your family.
As the dust settles, Kratos opens the box, but in doing so, finds it empty. Nonetheless, Kratos and Zeus continue their battle, and this is where shit gets crazy intense. Gaia makes her surprise return after you're made to believe Kratos killed her earlier. It's so poetic that Kratos, the god, and the Titan all play such an integral role in the finale of this trilogy. You continue to fight Zeus in Gaia's heart, and it's so incredibly intense. I can't stress how quick my heart was beating at this point. It was awesome.
You finally, and fittingly, put down both Gaia and Zeus with the Blade of Olympus.
Or that's what I would have said if it actually was the end, but it's not, because Zeus then becomes the Flying Dutchman and sends Kratos into a dark introspection, where Kratos is forced to confront all of his fears and all of his regrets once and for all. He of course again relives the killing of his wife and child. He relives his killing of Athena as well, but Athena speaks to Kratos saying to let go of fear bestowed in him by Zeus, as that fear is what has driven Zeus time and time again to remain in power. In this dark place, Kratos, through the fires of hope instilled in him by Pandora, learns to let go of fear. He learns to let go of self-hatred. He no longer seeks external validation or the forgiveness of others, because true forgiveness comes from within. And with that, he finally forgives himself. Overcoming his fear and self-hatred, Kratos regains consciousness and regains his godly powers. The box was empty because Kratos still possessed those powers of the box deep within him the entire time, and he had to overcome his mental barriers in order to draw the power back out. The power of hope. Then, in a powerful first-person perspective, you beat both the spirit and body of Zeus into a bloody pulp, releasing all the pent-up rage and anger not just towards the gods or the titans, but towards yourself as well, finally putting an end to Zeus's reign of terror. Athena then reappears claiming mankind is ready for her message and demands that Kratos give her the godly powers the box possessed. But not only that, Athena goes on to reveal even more about Pandora's box and how it is really the root cause of everything. Buckle your goddamn seatbelts, it's time for more lore! So as I mentioned earlier, Zeus ordered Hephaestus to forge Pandora's box to conceal the evils of the Great War. But when the box was sealed, Athena also bestowed in it the power of hope to counteract the evils locked inside, in fear of it ever being opened and causing pure destruction. When Kratos opened the box, he was able to use that hope against Ares, but it subsided deep within himself as all of his hatred, anger, and guilt persisted. Meanwhile, the evils locked inside the box when released corrupted all the other gods, driving them power-hungry and paranoid, resulting in Zeus betraying Kratos. Now, this is a little unclear to me because my thing is, wait, there was already this paranoia that started with Kronos. That was the whole point of God of War 2, right? So I think it's not so much that the evils in the box made Zeus evil, but more so that it exaggerated these subliminal fears he was having about this prophecy that Kronos also had about their bloodline rising up to take over each other. I'm sure one of you who have like a PhD in God of War will be able to tell me if I've got that right or not. But anyways, now Kratos wields the power of hope that Athena put in the box, and she wants it back. Kratos refuses to give Athena his power and instead chooses to sacrifice himself so that the hope locked within him will be dispersed throughout mankind. You know, whatever's left of it. After the credits, we see a bloody trail heading towards the sea, so of course where Kratos is now, we have no clue. Just kidding, he's obviously in the sea. Not gonna lie though, the whole power of hope thing was a lot cheesier of an ending than I was expecting we'd end up at, and that's not a bad thing. I love cheese more than I love myself. But really, that was a wonderful finale, and beautifully inversely symmetrical to how Kratos' story began. What an ending. So that was the God of War trilogy, and it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. To no surprise, the bosses, the music, the characters, the visuals, the story, everything across the board is just immaculate. I cannot recommend this trilogy enough. It's some of the most fun I've ever had playing any video games, and I can't wait to see what the new era of God of War has in store for me. I have absolutely no clue how Kratos survives or how he has a son. I don't even know when I'm gonna check out those games, but I cannot wait for the day that I finally do because I know they are going to be great. Other than that, I don't have a great cohesive way to wrap things up here in a nice little Pandora's box. See what I did there?
I hope you die in a fire!
All I'll say is, if you haven't played these games for yourself, you absolutely have to play them. They are brilliant, they are must play. Play them for yourself. And with that, I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.